Tēnā koutou kia tā. Welcome everybody to this public and active transport committee meeting. And I will kick off with a kara.
Turn your mic on.
Apologies. Tēnā koutou kia tā. Welcome everybody to this public and active transport committee meeting. I will kick the meeting off with a karakia. Te kia ranga, te kia raro, te kia weho, te ki mōtoa, te ki te sangata, ka ronga te pau, a ronga te ao, homi e, hui e, taki e. Righty ho, we have apologies from, are these self-activated when you stop speaking, someone else speaks?
No, you gotta turn it.
But you're not, okay, thank you. We have apologies from Alexa and Gretchen. And we've got Michael online, Michael Law's online. So I'll move those apologies from Alexa Forbes and Gretchen and Robson received, given by Gary. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Public forum today, we've got Sarah Otis and Paul Coffey to speak. I presume it's the Dunedin Tracks and Trails Trust on behalf of, is that correct? Welcome both of you, nice to have you here. You know the rules around public forum. You will just have to activate that microphone and you probably, whoever's speaking, just make sure it's pretty close to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for hearing us. It's for all of you, it's again, we appreciate that. So this is Sarah Davis-Neatis, and I'm Paul Coffey. We are from the Dunedin Tracks and Trails. We're not the trust, that's what we're operating as. So it's actually the Dunedin Tracks Network Trust, but we'll get through that. So the role of the trust is an overarching body to support a number of local community groups who want to put cycle trails in their communities. And our role is to assist them with accessing funding, with planning information, with, we will be the organisation that signed the long-term lease agreements. We're also with a couple of people already. We've signed an agreement to provide an easement over their land. So that's the role of our trust. Basically, we've got a passion for getting people outdoors. Plus, we know the economic benefits of these trails, and we want to see that happening for Otago and Dunedin in particular.
Have we got that PowerPoint? Thank you. Just one moment. I'll just share my screen.
It's not good thinking. Perfect on that one.
Next page.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So yes, again, just want to acknowledge and congratulate the staff and councillors on the development of this vision. We think it's awesome, it's relevant, and like we say there, it's diverse and not necessarily aligned with the whims of the government. And we feel we've been heard and represented in a number of the constituencies.
It's an old byline. It was actually used by the Hillary Commission, for people who remember what that was. What we want to do is get more people more active more often. Okay, they'll get a better appreciation for the environment and there's better health outcomes. So we're really keen to do that, as well as those economic outcomes that we know will come from cycling.
So we see both your vision and our vision closely aligned. You're looking at those words like access, resilience, community buy-in, all of those sorts of things. So a key thing here is that we want to help you achieving your vision, working to achieve our vision. It covers each of those areas in your vision, the communities specifically, the environment, the climate, the resilience, the transport. So just to highlight, we are a charitable trust and we can access those funds beyond ratepayers and the government. We're also malleable, so while we're focused on trails and under the previous government that came under active transport specifically, we're not fussy about where the funding may end up coming from, and we'll easily jump ship into the economic development camp and where the funds are there. So we believe we're coming from a good position to seek funding to support the implementation of trails.
I don't think I need to say anything here. We've highlighted a whole lot of things out of your plan where we believe that we can assist you in getting some outcomes to happen.
So probably just give you a minute to have a wee read. Yeah.
So what we want to do overall is link existing trails. We want to make the Otago a cycling destination. If we succeed in what we want to do, we will be rivaling that of the south of France. People won't have to go to the south of France to do that cycling experience. They can come here to Otago to do it. Through our vineyards, past our lakes, down to along our coastal shores. Now, and we will attract people out of that south of France to do this, okay? And we know it's not totally your responsibility, but the elephant in the room for a lot of people is they're getting from Outram through to Hindon. Now, this is not along the rail line. You know, the DCC has got a conversation around that they're already having about the use of the Taieri Gorge and the train, and we would keep away from that and try to go up the actual river itself and up the gorge. So we keep it off that rail line and we're hands off, basically.
So looking at those visions, obviously that's a 30, 50-year plan. In the more immediate future, specifically in the next 3 to 5 years, the Coastal Community Cycle Connection and the Taieri Trail we see as key in creating those links and possibly into Hindon. We're making excellent progress in that space. The Coastal Communities Trail is split into 5 sections, and we've got easements, agreement to grant easements, making one of those sections just about ready to go. And we're also halfway to funding a design for the bridge over Wakawai River. The Taieri Trail is again in 3 sections, and we're working closely with the ORC flood protection team and developing an agreed pathway to move forward from Mosgiel to Outram. And we have started comms with NZTA in relation to a potential clip-on at the Outram Bridge. So to get some great progress in these 2 trails, we're looking at making a plan to raise 6 million over the next 5 years to make some real headway on those 2. So again, just to highlight, we're not coming to the ORC or the Dunedin City Council for that matter, for the majority of that 6 million. There is immense community support, and there are funding agencies that will be approaching.
Already we've got both on the Taieri, a landowner is offering people access to his property for an event, which we expect to raise the money is going to be donated to that Taieri Trails group. And in the coastal community, there's another landowner who's also doing the same, opening his land up for people to get access to that for another event. So there is support in the community.
Next page.
Oh, that was the end.
Oh,
Oh, hang on, it's.
there's one about a 10-year
Yes,
plan.
it has, it never showed it, just a moment. Yeah.
So like everyone else, we will actually come and ask you for money eventually, because if we don't ask you for money, you can't give us anything. So, but what we really do want is we want you to put into your active transport plan that route across the Taieri. We need that so that when we get close to state highways, that we can then, and things may change, access funds from Waka Kotahi. And the DC sees that legitimisation for that as well. So we need that in your active transport plan, please. You've already got the coastal communities there, and we appreciate that, but we want you to add that one. Okay. We want to legitimise a partnership. Your staff are already working with us, and we do appreciate that, but we want them to have a bit more permission to do that. And they're going out of their way as it is now, but we want them to bend over backwards. So we want you guys to support us in that. And we just appreciate the time. Anything else you want to say? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much to both of you. Like I said, it's great to have you here. It also seems that, you're filling that void to ensure that what's existing and what's happening out there, you're providing a level of service that seems to give greater certainty that there will be progress made. And the fact that, you're focused on collaboration with the key players and, looking for funding and also even that dialogue sounds like with landowners and that sort of thing. So thank you for all your good work. Are there any questions? Gary, then Kevin, then Brian, and
Thanks.
then Elliot.
Really interesting, thanks. So for all the hype around the railway line, you will be totally separate to the railway line. You will be a trail. The railway line can still operate. And you will be a totally separate.
That's the
Right.
intention to get to Hindon. Now, we haven't looked at, I don't think anyone's looked at getting from Hindon to Middlemarch. So there would have to be a lot of negotiation with landowners to get through to there. But from Outram to Hindon is away from that line. And we know that the cruise ships only want the trains at this stage to go to Hindon because of the time factor it takes.
Yes.
So we would keep away from that, yes.
But you're in the challenging topography to get to Hindon, and then
And
beyond that
deep
is
stream,
easy
lee
topography.
stream, and I've only ever swum down that river. I've tried to walk down it, and it is about 800 meters an hour if you're lucky when you're trying to walk down that, along the riverbank. So even if that, so
Still got to be a feasibility study done on what that Outram to
Yeah.
Hindon would look like, but at this, judging by where everyone seems to be at the moment, there seems to be desire to maintain a train tourism product, and there's also the desire to kind of keep some trail connection to Middlemarch. So if we focus on Outram to Hindon at the moment, then it supports a train product or it supports an additional product. Outram, it's a good place for us to focus on in the immediate short term.
you're able to get on the train with your bike, get off, bike back. It's a day trip.
Probably open up all those.
Yeah, it's another product.
Yes. In parallel, so that would be great. Thank you.
Kevin?
Just two quick ones. How much of that 6 million is actually going on construction as opposed to consultation?
Oh, most of it, there's no, we don't have a budget for consultation.
We're it.
We-
There are other trustees.
There's some design of bridges, but majority is, we're even applying for grants for the cost of easement registering and things, so the majority of that is construction.
And all the work seems to be linking trails from here south as opposed, so what work is being done or have you done with linking Alps to Ocean, which is
That's the coastal connection part of that. So,
the map didn't go quite up that far. But
Oh no, it goes to Wakaiti at the moment,
yeah,
so that's stage one. We could go to Oamaru, but that would be maybe a 100-year plan at this stage. That's the goal. The goal is to totally get to Alps to Ocean.
Thank you.
Brian?
Cool. Cool. Thank you for your work. It's really important. There's a big focus on cycleways. What about just specifically walkways? I notice you've talked about access to waterways.
Oh, sorry.
so we are right currently, we are working on a memorandum of understanding with the DCC and Department of Conservation.
Yeah.
It's with the dock lawyers. It's been there for some time, but we won't mention that too loudly. And the actual track network within our city is extensive. And mostly it's maintained by volunteers throughout the city. And we would and will work with people who want to extend that. We're really keen on that walking. And we see the one that goes up along the actual, along the coast on the peninsula as being a walking opportunity. We see that can link with farm stays, with people providing accommodation, food, picking up packs, dropping packs off for both walkers and cyclists. Walkers would just take a little bit longer, cyclists,
The construction is for shared paths, so it's walking, running, biking, buggies.
Cool.
It's use.
200 meters wide for everything if we can,
Cool.
200 bit meters.
Elliot.
Yeah, it was cool to see the mahi you guys are up to. I was wondering if the trust's sort of remit is specifically limited to those more like ex-urban trails, or if it just makes sense that that's where the investment's going at the moment, as opposed to say tracks and stuff within this city.
See that as urban cycleways and definitely in the domain of the city council and tied in with the pathing and the roading infrastructure and stuff. So we see this as a gap where no one's operating. It doesn't really fall under the DCC and it doesn't really fall under the ORC. It doesn't. It's in no man's land at the moment.
And the DTC have just developed a new track. Can't remember what they call it. It was a policy and plan, I think. So they are putting money into that every year for the next at least 3 or 4 years. I think it's $50,000. And their plan is to do some of that linking already. So we don't need to be in that market yet.
Ideally, they will link. You'll be able to get on your bike in your house anywhere in Dunedin or whatever and head quickly to an off-road trail. But yeah, ours are off-road is probably a key thing as well.
That, I think, exhausts the questions. So once again, thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for keeping us informed. Keep up the good work and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure,
you.
we will see our faces again. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Cheers. Moving on to the next item, which is confirmation of the agenda. We received an email from CEO Richard this morning with regards to item 7.3, and I'll just hand over to Richard just to cover off the reasons why that item has been withdrawn, and then we'll confirm the agenda.
Thanks, Andrew. So, yeah, just to confirm that we will remove the proposed paper, just want to make sure I get the number right, 7.3 from the agenda. There's been some further information received from NZTA, who are obviously our partners in the public transport space, and in order to provide appropriate advice to the committee, we do just need to ensure that we consider that information, then update that paper and bring it back to you. So that's the reason that I am going to withdraw that, which is under 9.9 of standing orders. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Any queries? Pretty clear. Okay, I will move confirmation of the agenda, noting the withdrawal of item 7.3, seconded by Elliot. Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Was it? No, I thought you were going to say something, Tim.
Oh, me.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm good.
Sorry. Should turn my microphone on too. So moving on to item 7. Oh, sorry. Oh, gosh. Declarations of interest, item 4, just a standard reminder. Moving on to item 5, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the 9th of November 2023 meeting. Someone like to move those meetings are true and correct. Yeah. Moved by Kate, seconded by Elliot. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. There are no open actions. So moving on to matters for consideration, 7.1, transport operating environment. Welcome to Lorraine. And Varghese, is he joining us? Yes. Welcome, Varghese. Transport operating environment. Great to have these reports coming through so we can understand what's going on operationally and from a legislative perspective, but we're in your hands, Lorraine and Buggies.
Yep, thank you. It's just to draw attention to those items. Sorry about that. There's been a bit going on. I thought at the end of last year I'm actually going to get a Christmas card from the Minister of Transport after all the letters that I've received in the lead up, but it didn't happen. But the key thing to note the rollback of the Community Connect. So that's what we implemented as of 1 July last year. So that affects the free fares for say 6 to 12-year-olds and the half price fares for the 18 to 24-year-olds if we were to go back to just our standard child and adult fares, and that's from the 1st of May this year. There were also changes on to Transport Choices funding. So basically a hold got put on that fairly early. But the main project for ORC is the super stop at Union Street, and that's further down the planning process. So we've already got our approval, so it's not affected by this decision, but likely a number of projects from our TA partners will be affected. There changes to the setting of speed limits and the removal of the requirement for the RTC Otago Regional Transport Committee to adopt a regional speed management plan. That doesn't need to happen now. But the TAs or the other road controlling authorities can still go ahead and implement their speed management plans. It's up to them to decide. But that will obviously raise issues with regional consistency potentially. And then the announcement that electric vehicles will be road user charges. So that's for the light vehicle fleet from mid this year, and not for the heavy vehicles until January 2026. But that's obviously going to factor into our future contracts as we move to electrification of fleet. So those are the main ones at that higher level. And then just a few updates that the Regional Transport Committees, Environment Southland and Otago, adopted the draft RLTP consultation on Friday. Mentioning the arrival of the first 11 electric buses, and it was very nice to be joined by so many of you this morning for the little tour that didn't quite go as smoothly as our first one. Don't know what happened there, but I'm sure it's all going to go very well, and quite a bit of excitement, and I think it's a really good milestone to meet. And then just to highlight that we are moving forward on the installation of e-signage. So these initial procurements started about 6 months ago, but they have to come from Australia, and we managed to get in just behind one of the Australian states placing a really large order for about 1,000. So our initial 30 have just started arriving. And the proposal is just to install them based on key spots that are really the high activity ones. And now we've started the procurement for, actually it's in the report of 90 in total, but it will actually be 70 in total. And then the installation of those further 40 will be better informed by the outcomes of a bus audit project that we're doing in conjunction with Dunedin City Council. So those are the main points that are noted in the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Just actually, just before I go to Tim, I should have said also that the minutes from the Oh, sorry,
Right.
just before I go to Tim, I should have said that the attachment of the Otago South and Regional Transport Committee meeting from the 20th of the 11th, 2023, and as you alluded to, they've just had another one on the 2nd, I think. So it's good to have those there, and I'm Kate as chair of that committee. It's fantastic that information is coming through as well. Tim, questions?
Thank you, Andrew. Just, have we done any sort of financial analysis on the impact of the rollback of the Community Connect funding being withdrawn at all? Do we know what happens to our long-term plan or even our current year's forecast?
We're working on it. In essence, it's the rollback of government subsidising us for the difference in the fare. So there are a few decisions that the council will have to make before we can actually determine the financial impact. For instance, if the council wants to retain some of the concessions.
My understanding is that the ability to have a $2 fare is supported by the funding that we're getting from government. So that what would happen to the $2 fare if we didn't have government funding?
So the Community Connect doesn't affect the $2 fare. In part, we are supported to have a $2 flat fare, but that's only in Queenstown. We currently pay a penalty on the $2 fare in Dunedin, but that's an issue that we're working through with NZTA at the moment.
The penalty?
Yes, because it was implemented as a trial. It wasn't as a fully approved fare structure.
So how does the penalty work? I mean, cost us something?
Just turn your microphone on, please. Sorry, turn your microphone off, please, Tim.
I'm trying to understand what the penalty would be and what the cost of that penalty is to this organisation, and actually how we agree to accept a penalty.
I don't know the cost off the top of my head. Jack may do in the back of the room, but the penalty works because we were approved to run services at a certain fare structure. So which is the old fare structure. When we determined to use the $2 flat fare, we trialled it, and it met with community acceptance, and fare patronage is increasing, so it seems to be achieving the outcomes. But depending on what the average adult price was, so that depends on your mix of your concession fares and things like that, and that will have changed a lot over time because of subsidy. But so depending on what the average adult price was, which might have been and I'm not going to guess, but we're paying we're not receiving the 51% on the difference.
So what is the cost of the penalty? How much is it a year?
So I think the answer that Ryan gives, we're not sure. We'd have to bring those financials through. In terms of the Community Connect update within this paper, there's a decision to be made by council there. There could be no direct financial impact because we just decided to put the fares back to the structure that they were before Community Connect came in.
Yeah.
Or council could choose to fund the difference, and we need to bring some of those numbers based on the revenue that we've received since Community Connect was applied. When was that last middle or when it came in? So those decisions still need to be made. I think what we can anticipate is that the removal of it or bringing it in saw an increase in revenue and an increase in patronage. So there's some things that we need to set out for council to enable a decision to be made. And then the other thing we have got going on at the moment, as we know, is the long-term plan and the investment in the Dunedin network over the next 10 years, which can include a decision on fares. So we've indicated retaining the existing fare structure, but also then needing to have that conversation with NZTA about the co-funding and ensuring that we don't end up being penalised because we agree on what the structure is that NZTA agree to fund with us. The risk we have as an organisation is making decisions in between these planning cycles, and therefore the organisation having to bear those costs. So getting the planning right up front is the most important thing, and trying not to make decisions in between cycles that end up imposing a financial, it's not a penalty, it's there's financial cost to us when we're making some of those decisions around fares, driver wages and other things. And it's not saying those decisions are wrong. It's just saying that if we can get those things right up front and agree with our partners what the funding model will be, then we don't risk carrying those costs ourselves as we progress. So there's a few key decisions to be made, some sooner than others, and this Community Connect is one that will come in the next couple of months, because we need to decide, this table needs to decide as a council what you are going to do, given that the government subsidy on those fares is disappearing.
So in terms of the timetable, we've got to set rates for our long-term plan. Is it going to fit within that? Are we going to have?
So this decision on Community Connect will come before that and ahead of that. It needs to be made ahead of the concession being lifted, which is end of April. So it'll come probably to the March meeting, I imagine. Is that the plan, Laurie?
We're aiming for February, but
You're aiming for February. It's getting
March.
tight. So they'll come very shortly. The balance of it is obviously part of a long-term plan, and you'll have the opportunity to make those decisions ahead of finalising anything in June.
Thanks.
So I just apologise that when I say we pay a penalty, we don't actually pay it. We incur a penalty for the average price of the fare versus what the average price of the fare for $2, which is obviously less than $2 across all the fares. So it's just that differential. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard and Lorraine. Any further questions?
Just a real quick one. I was just wondering if those e-signs that are going to be brought in, are they just the same as those signs you see at the start and the end of the bus stop?
Yeah.
Cheers. Awesome. Yeah. The big
Oh, no.
No, so they're the smaller rectangular ones that have the, so they're in the bus hub and
Right,
stops,
those
not the
little-
big ones at the end.
Okay.
All set? Brian, then Kate.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, what will those signs actually say? Will they just say, bus number 6 will be here in 6 minutes? Will they tell us if bus number 6 has been cancelled?
Yes, the real-time information for the smaller tablets that are at the bus hub. So they will be for stops along routes. So if there's multiple routes, it'll identify which bus it is and when it's due to arrive. And they have this little symbol like the Wi-Fi thing, if it's live or if it's scheduled information. And if it's cancelled, they will display that as long as the cancellation is posted into the feed. Yeah. There will be times, I'm sure, when a bus won't turn up, but the reliability will be a lot higher than it is now.
Okay, but I mean, a bus is either coming in 6 minutes or it's not, I suspect. That's the key thing, yeah. If it says 6 minutes, then it's coming in 6 minutes.
Yes, it's real-time information.
Yeah.
So it's the same as the feed that's feeding transit, that's feeding our website.
Yeah.
And that's feeding the small and the big displays at the hub.
Yeah, no, it's great. I'm really excited by this. Yeah, thank you.
Kate.
Thank you. I just want to interrogate slightly the Community Connect changes, which was a relatively recent development anyway. But and I just want to check that I've got it right. If you're a community card holder, or your family are, the children would still get the half fare that is there for the 13 to 24-year-olds. And the 5 to 12-year-olds would be half fare if your community.
No, if you're a community service card holder,
Yeah.
don't know how it works for the family, but if you hold it, then you'll get the concession for the card.
Yeah.
If it applies for the family, then yes, but it won't if it's not the child or
Yeah.
especially the youth plus or that young adult, then they wouldn't.
And this is exactly why I'm asking the question. We've got a skewed demographic in Otago and in Dunedin specifically. because of a lot of students either at Polytech or at the university. And I'm just wanting to know if this is going to affect our bus service more potentially than others because of that skew, that you've got students who will be in that young age who are in households which may, I mean, I presume they can equally be entitled to community cards, community service cards in their flats, and they would get half price.
It's under 24.
Mm.
I'm paying $1.
Yeah, so, yeah. But the question is about the 5 to 12-year-olds, if their household, they're free at the moment, they'd be $1. That's how you see it translating to community service people?
Half price fare.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there's, yeah.
The children, I mean, we have a half price fare.
Microphone, thanks.
I mean, I presume that the decision will be to keep a half price fare for 5 to 12-year-olds. It's the free fares that we had for 6 to 12-year-olds, and then we had previously the youth fare to 18, and now the Community Connect extended that out for 18 to 24-year-olds. So those are the brackets that potentially affected. So there'll still be a child fare, but it'll be for 5 to 12-year-olds.
So okay, what I'm hearing is when we present this for a discussion and a decision on what ORC chooses to do with its fee structure after the end of April, you'd want to make sure we present that information about the use of the community services card and how that might apply to students in flats, children and families where a card might be held by one of ours. So we'll just make sure that that information's there so we can best understand, and we'll obviously have the data in terms of how many people have been using the various fares since they came in as well.
Thank you. I'm just really concerned that we may be, our community may be worse affected by this. So it's
Thank you. Any other queries, questions? If not, it's a noting paper. Someone like to move that we note this report? Moved by Gary, seconded by Kate. Is there any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Matisse, thank you very much. So moving on to 7.2, which is the Public Transport Network Performance Report for Q1 and Q2, the 23-4 year. Welcome to Jack and Julian and Casey. Gemma. Oh, sorry. Bigger.
Gemma Wilson is Senior Operations Analyst, and I know you're all familiar
Just a senior moment, sorry.
I know you're all familiar with Julian and you think it's him presenting this every time, but really the workhorse behind it is Gemma.
Take all the praise, Julian.
Awesome. Welcome, team. We're in your hands.
Yeah, so we're looking primarily at patronage for the first 6 months of the financial year, July to December. Just going through each of the sections of the report, take any questions afterwards. In brief, Dunedin has seen a 28% increase in patronage compared to the same period in the previous year. And when we compare to 2018-19 financial year, which we do each of these reports, because it's the last full year where we didn't have any disruption from COVID restrictions or driver shortages, we're actually posting a 32% increase. So bracketing that and bracketing all these figures are the Community Connect impacts that may or may not be contributing to a proportion of these increases. But in summary, patronage continues to increase reasonably significantly. And actually, we are exceeding the previous 6 years worth of patronage in Dunedin. For Queenstown, we have a 62% increase in patronage compared to the previous financial year. Just a note on that, we had reduced timetables in place in Queenstown for a longer period than we did in Dunedin. They weren't introduced until late June, reintroduced until late June 2023. But that being said, It's a significant increase, and I think I've noted in the report that the patronage for the 6 months exceeds the full year patronage for both 2021 and 21-22 financial years as well, which is a good result. That's the full year patronage has been by the 6 months to date that we've had in Queenstown. Onto Queenstown Ferry, the report highlights a technical difficulty with reporting data for November and December, which has since been amended, and I think we'll have an updated sheet with the correct figures on it. The story is pretty much the same as it's been for the last 3 months or so. The revenue is up 3%, patronage is down. Again, one of the key things related to the Queenstown Ferry is that the full price fare, or the change from half price fares to full price fare, is a change from $5 to $10, which, although it's the same percentage, is obviously significantly different sum of money compared to the return to full price fares for bus transport. So that is likely having an impact on the performance. Total mobility again continues to increase. For 6 months to date, we've seen a 12% increase compared to the previous financial year. Customer feedback, it's a new area in the report, but only new for the last, because we haven't done it for a year or so. We collect an awful lot of information about customer feedback, and there's an awful lot of ways of segregating and presenting that information. Previously, the feedback was that it was too complex and granular. We used to present it in tables and so on. So what we've put in the report is kind of a reasonably high-level pie chart, which gives you a summary of where we're at in terms of the kind of feedback, which includes compliments, complaints, anything we get through the door. And I think based on your views on this and any feedback we get subsequently, we can refine that to present whatever you want to see in future reports, whether it's a split by operator, separating out complaints from positive feedback from general requests and that sort of thing. One key thing to note is that the level of complaints isn't actually particularly high for the size of the network, and it also isn't increasing proportionately along with the increase in patronage. The more passengers you put on, you naturally expect to get an equal amount or a similar amount of inquiries and feedback, positive or negative or otherwise. Other than perhaps lost property in Queenstown, we're not seeing that sort of commensurate increase. So by that, I mean, we've got a 60% increase in patronage in Queenstown. We haven't got a 60% increase in complaints, for example. Just moving on to the last section of the report, Mosgiel, an update on the new routes reintroduced and a survey we did on those routes. We introduced a number of additional peak services, mornings and afternoons, to and from Dunedin. Those are a stopping service, so just extra services, so that half-hourly frequency at peak times becomes a 15-minute service. We also added an express service, the Route 78, which stops twice in Mosgiel before heading straight to the bus hub. And patronage is looking positive. If you're looking at Mosgiel routes in isolation, they've increased by 22% compared to the same period in the previous financial year. But just bracketing that, as noted in the report, it's in the context of the entire network overall increasing in patronage. And we do know that an awful lot of the capacity and we know this from recent decisions in bringing new school services in, or services that service schools from that area. A lot of the capacity is taken by school children, school pupils. School term has just started. I think in 3 months' time, after we've seen the impact of an entire 4 years cohort of new pupils, we will have a better picture of the capacity, or whether it's sufficient capacity, whether there are going to be further constraints, the success of the service, whether we need to tinker with anything and so on. But at the moment, it's looking reasonably positive. We've had some feedback about the bulk of the feedback we've had, and I come on to this on the survey, is about putting additional stops on the express service. So having some additional stops in Princes Street, having some additional on Mosgiel, having one in Green Island. But it's a bit of a juggling act. So at that point, it stops becoming an express service and it just becomes a stopping service again. But but that comes out in the survey that we did. So moving on to that, we put out a survey of Mosgiel route passengers specifically. It took place through November and had several hundred responses. The idea of that survey was to understand the awareness and satisfaction in general with the new services and the existing Mosgiel services, and also what people use the service for. Satisfaction and awareness of the services were both above 70%. When we asked people why they use the 77 service, that's the normal service instead of the express service, 27% of people said it doesn't stop at my normal bus stop, and 29% said that the existing service goes where I want it to go. And again, as I noted earlier, a number of people commented that they wanted additional stops in Mosgiel and Princes Street. There are some additional charts in there. They do come out a little bit small. They're formatted a little bit smaller in the report. So if anyone wants some A3 printouts of the charts, because there are a number of questions asked, then we can provide that separately. Other than that, happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Julian. Just before I go to Kate, Gemma, did you want to add anything from a data perspective, or Jack from a total mobility perspective? No? Julian, you described the result as pretty good, and I was just thinking, if you're an accountant with a financial result, they often are quite conservative in what they say, and I think you've been quite modest in terms of the overall result.
Yeah.
And the slight downturn with the ferry revenue and patronage is a pretty good reason for that. So well done. Good effort, great result. Kate.
Yeah.
Thank you. A great report and really good data. I just wonder, we have a feedback loop. We get 1,000 or 1,100 feedbacks, which we inherently take as complaints because there's none of those titles really are positive feedback. Is there any place that we can get positive feedback? Because it doesn't appear to be on that form.
So we can segregate them, and some of that, driver behaviour is the biggest sector on that pie chart. And within that, there'll be a mixture. The majority probably will be complaints, to be fair, but there is positive feedback as well. We can present and segregate it further into those sort of tranches.
Yeah, but I think so you're a bus driver. All they hear in our reports is complaints about their bus driving. It's not particularly good. You don't hear the good stuff. And I would say that is a really low number of feedbacks given from the patronage. And so I just want to make sure that we're balancing this story that might be coming here.
Yeah.
And so the question is it fair to, because they've sort of put in as complaints, which I think I wouldn't know if they're all complaints, because they're just feedback, which doesn't mean they're a complaint. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we can, and we could look to separate them out. You will always get more complaints than compliments. And in terms of the bus drivers, when compliments come in, we do pass them on definitely to as individuals compliments, whereas we deal with complaints generally as bulk.
So, and the other reason I was going to say, look, there is inherently people who have difficulty understanding what we've required is a much more, we've got a lot of relatively recent immigrants. And so I just hope there isn't an underlying prejudice against understanding what people are doing and saying, which is coming through in the communication with drivers. And that's a risk. Where I'm going with this is not asked. The best reason I'm asking this is I'm not so worried about the number of feedbacks, is what are we learning from them, and are we improving the service because of it? And that's what, again, isn't clear on the reporting, because I think the numbers could be potentially misinterpreted.
Yeah, but I disagree. We can work together to look at how we can present that better, or some select stories about different issues. We try to give some examples of what issues may come up in the report, but if there's a repeat issue that's occurring repeatedly, and it's clearly a negative issue, and we followed up and we can track those issues. If it's a lot of it, again, an example I mentioned in the report is sometimes we will have, it's an education process, so it might go through, Facebook or our media channels or some other thing about explaining, why this is happening at this time. Or I think I used the example of, making a difficult left turn maneuver in an intersection. Any heavy vehicle, including a bus, is allowed to straddle the lanes. They may have to do that to safely do that. It's a skill in itself, but often, a large proportion of feedback we get about that kind of maneuver is, hey, this happened, this is not very good, bad driver, which isn't correct. So there's an education piece on some of the complaints, and but certainly we can look at how we can better reflect the nature of what's been presented to that chart and refine it a bit better.
Richard.
Can I just add to that, Kate, because we did have a discussion about this last week when we met with QRDC, and I think the way I look at this and the fact that this data is now being included is we've had a real focus for 12 months or 18 months on actually just getting the timetable back up and running, and first and foremost getting the buses on the network at the times we say they're going to be on the network with enough drivers and as a primary focus, as it should have been. And the team now are looking for the other opportunities we have to improve the service, and this I would say is the first step in that. So how we use this data is the most important thing, and I know the team are starting to think about, this is this quarter's report, and it's a bit of a data dump, which is great because at least we can see what's being collected. But I know there's already some thought going into how do we use this to target our improvements, and we've got real-time signage. There'll be some things that come out of this, but it's good that we've now got this space because we've got the drivers and the network running as it should have been. And so I just see it, as a bit of it's the next step in that process post the COVID issues that we had.
Thank you.
The other thing I mentioned is, and Richard touched on it, we use this for our contract management. The operators are contracted to deliver the service and at certain times and all that sort of thing. There's also, the quality of the service they deliver. There are different metrics around certain elements of behaviours or customer experience and that sort of thing. So everything that we need to investigate is very much reflected in the management of those contracts as well.
Thank you. Elliot.
I think this report's overwhelmingly positive and stuff, which is great. We did hear in the finance committee that we were, I think, yellow on the bus timeliness, mostly because of construction and the bus hub and stuff like that. I was wondering if we had the figures for, because obviously it's less than 95% on time, I think, got us that yellow thing in the finance committee, but I was just wondering if we had figures on what that percentage was of buses showing up on time, and then also if stopping most cars from entering the bus hub has helped in that space.
Don't have the figures to hand, so I'm thinking of them, but I rather give them to you when I'm certain of what they are. But it's a high figure. I think it's 90 something. But both Queenstown and Dunedin are heavily affected by what's going on with traffic and building and all that sort of stuff. And it's long-term projects that will have a fantastic benefit when they're finished, and they will allow things, touch wood, to return to more reliability. But we have a very high level of reliability to expect as well. So anytime we drop below, I think, like you said, 95, 96%, then it goes from a green result to a yellow result. The bus hub, temporary sort of work in the bus hub won't have much of an effect on timeliness, because there are only short periods of time that cars were unable to get in and out. But I think overall, when the works are finished, George Street's finished and other areas are finished around the city, there's some other stuff going on. There's a lot of underground pipes and things around Moray Place and so on. When those different things are finished, then it will allow us to, review timeliness in a better manner without having the distraction of traffic being the cause. The other thing is, timetables are set at a point in time. Some of the contracts, the timetable might have been set in 2017. We need time when these works are finished to monitor the impact of these things. And now we didn't previously. Now we do have really good sets of data where we can actually go, okay, well, across a Princess Street, this section here, these buses are always, 2 minutes early, whatever it is. So there are a number of tools we have that we didn't have previously that we can use to monitor that behaviour.
On that sort of note of tools and stuff, I was wondering if we had data from the transit app, because obviously people can fill out details of like, how was your journey, how's the bus stop and all that stuff when they use the transit app. Do we have access to that data?
We have access to a monthly set of stats that tells you the number of users. We actually used to put it in this report. I'm not sure when we stopped doing that, but it's because the level of usage is quite high, so it's a useful figure to have. But I'm not sure if it.
No, I think we'll have to request it. But,
Yeah, we could request it and see if they'll give it to us. Yeah, it's something we only see live when we're monitoring it, because you can see, emojis popping up and that sort of thing, saying I'm happy, or occasionally sad.
Excellent, thank you. Any further questions? Ron, sorry.
Yeah, look, on the face of it, looks like there's some really positive news in terms of patronage. But what should I actually take from the increases in patronage, bearing in mind that the top, as you say, that the full timetables were reintroduced to Dunedin in February 2023. So has there been, we look at the data, has there been any, for example, like for like comparison in terms of particular routes in the time frame against the previous, so that I can get some comfort? Because my ears are ringing with a 28% increase, whereas in fact a lot of that's on the basis of increased timetables, of course.
I think from my point of view, that's why we put the 2018-19 comparison in, because there's so much disrupted data, because there's so many things that happened in the last 3 years, that it's that period of time is the last clean set of data where we had a reasonably high level of patronage, the highest point that we ever had at that time.
So this is the 32%.
Yeah, so that strips out sort of actually, I think fares were higher back then, but that marginally higher possibly, but other than that, everything is more or less the same.
Okay, good answer. Thank you.
Beaker. We've introduced Beaker.
Beaker was introduced, yeah.
Okay, cool.
All set, Brian?
Yep, that's cool.
Gary.
Thanks. Some of these numbers are quite interesting, and just looking at the new numbers that you've given us for the Queenstown Ferry and the revenue versus patronage, but looking at the graph and how the trend last year versus this year, and it seems as though we are following a relatively closest trend where we've had a decline for X number of months, and then we're following a trend again of a rapid increase. And I wonder, like if it's obviously something seasonal, that whether for some reason Christmas seems to have come a month later in Queenstown maybe, or whatever it is, that we seem to be a month behind. But overall, like to look at a glance at the numbers presented for the month, then we think, well, there's something, that's a detracting number and it's looking bad, but actually it is following the trend and increasing quite substantially. So it's really intriguing around the fare revenue versus patronage in comparison to what we earn versus patronage on buses.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really highlighting that something different to buses is well supported if it is if it's offering something unique. And I guess looking at the change in fare, is it that fare has changed. So has the fact that, well, I've wondered whether would there be a ceiling with that ferry around the fares, and then suddenly beyond that would be too much to pay. And do you think that there is an indication potentially being shown here, but then it's trending upwards, so maybe it isn't? I don't know, it's a long-winded question. But
so there's a couple of things. It is season. I think it reflects the tourist season. In terms of the data, firstly, with the ferry data, it doesn't go back as far as our bus data goes. So we don't have that sort of pre-COVID sort of comparison that we can do. But I can't answer the question as to whether there's a ceiling on the fares. There are other factors that would affect yeah, there may be other factors that will be affecting the popularity of the service, such as the timetable, the ferry have I think they have a capacity of 22 passengers or something versus 50 or 60 on a bus. And you've got 4 stops versus, 100 in Queenstown. So there are other factors around that, and the location of the stops, which are Kelvin Heights one, will be, I guess, more of a community one. The other 2 or 3 you could argue maybe more touristy. So it's I suppose the short answer to your question is I can't answer whether whether there's a point above $10 or a sweet spot where it works or doesn't work.
At the numbers currently being shown, then it looks exponentially more profitable, or whether profitable is the right word. Certainly revenue gathering as opposed to our patronage versus our what we gather on buses.
Yeah, well, I guess currently it's a net contract, so we don't collect the revenue on the contract, and we don't dictate the fare either. So in the future, that would be something we'd look at, is when it becomes part of the contracted as the terminology is full public transport service or whatever. It would be on a gross contract where the revenue, I guess, is at risk or for us to manage.
Cool. Thank you.
Given.
So with that answer, in light of that answer, is it possible that we may be better off keeping it the way it is and not having the risk? So if we keep it just as a net contract, we may be in a better financial position and still get the same result of moving people. Think about that one. It might be that's just thrown at me. Yeah, great to see the increased patronage, but we did have in the finance report also, we had the need an increased costs of 1.647 million additional costs with fares and wages and the likes of that going in. So it's great to see that more and more people are getting on board. You did a survey with the Mosgiel passengers to see if the new routes were suiting them and the new timetables and everything. So about 2 years ago, and it's probably not quite 2 years ago, we introduced a new service, the weekend service. We started talking about, but then introduced the weekend service to Palmerston. And part of that, we had representation then from people from Palmerston plus the group at Waikouaiti about a loop in Palmerston. And that was the last I heard from Dr. Palmer was being costed out and seeing if that could be fitted into the service. So A, is that underway, or is there, and B, are we going to ensure the service we've got it right on that Palmerston route? Have we got a survey going out to that group of people as well to see if they're comfortable with the service and do we need improvements or the like stuff?
So we haven't got a plan in place at the moment to introduce a loop service there or a survey. Not to say we couldn't do one. The service is popular, and at peak times again we've had to add some additional buses for capacity. But at the moment there are. I recall the conversation a couple of years ago. I don't recall the outcome, but there aren't any immediate plans to add a loop to the end of the service at the moment.
Right. So just a follow up to that. I was hoping I've got 2 lights on. Oh, because Brian's got his on. Brian, thank you.
Apologies.
I've still got 2 red lights on. That's good. I can talk longer. So further to that, with our long-term plan coming up, it would be really interesting to see. The Mosgiel one's obviously giving you some really good answers and some guidelines. It would be really, and I suppose that sort of survey for us to make decisions on our long-term plans, the more of that sort of information from the user would be quite helpful, because that would also reflect if there's, where fares come in, where frequency comes in, where the service schedules and that come in. Comment on that?
So yes, we did the survey on Mosgiel because it was a newly introduced survey. We did do a fairly significant significant engagement with the community on the wider Dunedin network for the Ears and Frequency business case, and we'll be looking at the information that we got from that to inform some potential changes now.
Thanks. All right, thank you.
No further questions? If not, Kate's indicated she's happy to move that we note this
Second.
summarising the public transport activity in Otago for the first 2 quarters of the 23-24 year, second by Kevin. Any discussion, Kate?
Sorry, I did actually have one question that I thought of after I indicated that, and that's just the route and timetable, and it's actually a question for you, Mr. Chairman. I think at the last meeting or one of our council meetings relatively recently, we had a presentation by Liz Angelo about a route or timetable issue. And we still aren't building in this feedback loop somehow. And I don't know that we've considered that or thought about it or whatever. She wanted to have the route that used to go. Yeah, you did. Okay, thank you. That's it. That answers that question. I want to thank the staff, including Kim, and the existing staff for this paper, because I think it's a huge improvement in the results, and congratulations to all the work that went to get us to this point where the patronage has gone up so well. Well done, you can all put. And I also want to thank all those drivers who have come and filled those gaps. It's great. I want to also thank the people who have done the best thing and got on the buses. It helps me as someone who doesn't get on a bus often to know that the roads are freer, fairer and working. What's really exciting for our commercial, and I'm sorry, I'm going to blame you, Mr. Chairman, for your presentation today at the electric bit, this idea of bringing out a 5 litre petrol can. I think it's really important that we reflect on what it does for our economy, because every time someone goes in and spends less on their transport, that's more money in our community, and especially if it's for electric buses, that the money goes into New Zealand-owned electric companies and not into overseas imported fuel. Those are real wins. They're really hard to measure, but those are the end results of what's happening here on the buses. So for all of those reasons, I think it's something really good to celebrate here, and I hope that we should be taking and measuring those bigger wins, but we don't. And I'm not asking staff to, because they're really hard to do. But the fact is that people are showing with their feet that this is a really good service and they get what good looks like and that you're delivering. I think it's really important, and I just want to celebrate that because I think it's a really good story. Thank you.
Well said, thank you. Kevin, was there anything you want?
No, I'm happy with that.
Any other speakers? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very, very much. Moving on to item 7.4, which is the Queenstown Public Transport Business Case update. Yes, welcome back. So the recommendations here are noting this report, recommending to council that it endorses the Queenstown Public Transport Business Case. And note the financial management and commercial cases are only in final draft form. Right, we're in your hands, Lorraine, I guess.
Hi, everyone. So Sean and Eric are present with us to help me and Lorraine on this presentation. So
Sean Hubbard is the project manager for the Queenstown Public Transport Services business case, and Eric is here from WSP, the consultants.
Welcome, Sean, and did you say
Eric?
Eric, sorry. Sorry, Eric.
Thank you.
So I'm not taking a lot of time on the background because we have been going through this several times. So I'll quickly skim through the backgrounds of the business case. So the high population growth is anticipated in Queenstown, and we are looking from a 5% bus share to 40% by 2028 for the Queenstown Transport Network to work. And the problems we identified through the business case is First problem is current capacity of the Queenstown public transport. Transport network means that public transport service will not accommodate the future motor targets. And the second problem is the current Queenstown public transport service does not provide an attractive alternative to the private car travel. And the case for change, the population growth is expected to be double in the next 30 years. And the issue of not acting would cause us a negative economic and reputational outcome for Queenstown and for New Zealand. And also we have other opportunities such as NSADAP happening. So this might be the right time for us to coordinate with those projects and have a better solution for Queenstown. And the preferred option from the business case includes 8 core interventions, which includes public transport service and fleet improvements, Stanley Street hub changes, Frankton hub changes, establishment of a depot for electric buses, and SH6 bus lanes to the south of Cowra Falls Bridge and local road, minor intersection improvements, and bus stop changes both on local roads and state highways. Other recommendations from the business case is investigating on-demand services in Queenstown Hill and Goldfield Heights, and public ownership of depot for competitive tender and interim changes for Stanley Street. So the preferred option, the service routes are like as seen in the presentation. So one would be from Queenstown, from Fernhill to Remarkles Park, and the other then Queenstown to Jacks Point, Kelvin Heights to Quail Rise, and Arrowtown. You'll be splitting the service from Arrowtown to Others Point into Arrowtown to Queenstown via Malagans Road, and the other one from Arrowtown to Frankton Hub. And this ferry would be service would be using the same route as it is at the current state. So we're pretty much going with the same ferry route. So it's staged into 3 or 4 different stages. So the first stage, which is between now and 27, would be increasing the frequencies during the peak hours. And from stage 2, for the Route 1, we will be looking at articulated vehicles and also increasing the frequency of the ferries and also the bus services. And the stage 3, we will be looking at having articulated buses and large buses. And the large buses would be through the Malagans route, and the articulated buses would be going through other 3 routes. And during that time, NSADAP could be constructed in the time period from 2024 to 27. And the bus depot is expected to be in between 2027 to 30 time period. So the BCR for the overall project would be 2.4. I put 2.3 in the paper. There's a slight change, so it's now 2.4, and have a high investment profile prioritization according to the Wakadai's manual, which would be 2. And this is the cost split between the proposed interventions, where the best depot would be 58 million, excluding the land. And the other ones sits with NSTA and QLDC. And the operating cost expected in 2053 would be 23 million per year, and probably like in 2034 range, it would be 12 million, including the ferry. And if you're looking at the on-demand services as well. So the project interdependencies depends on mostly on our new GPS, which would be coming in 1 or 2 weeks. So we had to relook whether how aligned are we with the new GPS. And the new depot in Queenstown is really critical for having a big fleet, since our current depot is really small, not sufficient enough to accommodate all the new proposed fleet. And the local road intersections that's to accommodate the articulated buses movements, that sits with QLDC and the QLDC arterials project required for reducing the car parks and reducing the traffic in town center, especially on the Stanley Street, to attract more bus users. And the INISETA program is scheduled for May 2024, and it's having a scheduled duration of 3.8 months, which would take us to
3 years, 8 months.
3 years, 8 months. 3 years, 8 months. That would take us to
months.
That's really fast. So it's 3 years, 8 months, and that will take us to nearly to 2008. And the bus lanes are essential on the state highway to the south of Cowra Bridge because of the high growth demand expected in the southern corridor. And for running the new large buses, we need new Edith Cable Bridge because the current one has weight limitations, which does not allow us to have a bigger fleet. The ones through the Malgans Road. And the other thing is QL is working on a travel demand SSPC. So we need strong travel demand measures to push the more shift towards public transportation. So we got like some of partners' comments from workshop last week, which is they agree that program is right from a theoretical perspective, but requested more details on some of the parts of the business case. NSTA has raised some concern on the Malgans Road option due to the low economic benefits because it was included as part of feedback from public consultation rather than from a economic perspective. And increasing the frequency of the current ferry service requires a better investment story. That's something that our partners has let us know as well. So we are working with the partners to address these comments. So we are looking at like the next steps would be getting endorsed from this committee and getting the business case endorsed by the Way to Go board, which would be taking the business case to QLDC Council and also to NSTA board. So NSTA board paper is expected to be in April.
Thank you very much, Fergus. We'll just go to Richard. He's painted a bit of context around.
Just sort of provide some context because obviously there's a lot of moving parts in the transport space with this process, LTP, and other things. So where we this business case has been presented a few times through its development through last year, and then at the December either 13 or 14, there was a decision made on the preferred option for LTP consultation, which is consistent with business case outcomes. That's not a decision that ORC will fund. It is just a decision that we will consult with the community, and it's consistent with the preferred option of the business case. The decision today enables the team to move forward with the business case through the approval process with NZTA, which is obviously critical for us to attract our co-investment in these services. So it is a really important step, but again, it is independent of our LTP and those decisions that need to be made. From our joint meeting with QRDC last week, they are obviously going through the same process with their LTP for the actions that they're responsible for under the business case, and then as our NZTA with their fairly major work. So there is a few moving parts to this. There has been a lot of work. What I've observed since coming into this is really good alignment from the three partners, which is great because that's not always the case. But in instance, there has been good involvement through the Way to Go process that has got to this point. I just would point out that there is a lot of talk about the bus depot, and it comes up in the next paper around the procurement strategy. There's no, and we talked a little bit about it before Christmas. There's no, the onus is on ORC to make a decision about that. The onus is not on us to build it. So there is still a huge amount of work to go, and it came up in this presentation, and it will be critical for the ongoing feasibility of an electric bus network in Queenstown. And we have some work to do to bring back to council and repeat this message in the next paper, the procurement strategy paper. But it appears in the business case, but it doesn't tie ORC in to needing to build and own and operate an electric bus or an electric depot. So again, I just want to make that point so that the table has a level of comfort that we're not signing ourselves up to a 58 million plus land piece of expenditure through the decision made today.
That's a relief. Thanks, Richard. I know Kate and then Brian. 2 in a year.
Thank you, and I expect you don't know yet, but the National Party were quite clear about some investments in bridges in Queenstown, I think, as they campaigned. The Edith Cable was not a state highway bridge, but is that one, do we have any idea if that is possibly a bridge that they're looking at assisting with? Because I don't think Queenstown Lakes has any planning for a new bridge there as the road.
No, we don't know what they're planning. That was in the National Party Transport Manifesto. There was that money for the Otago and Southland bridges, but that it's only a national-led coalition government, so we do need to wait until we see the GPS and some more clear direction this year. But in terms of the Edith Cavell Bridge, it is in QLDC's planning, and it is on the timeline that is required for this business case. Is it 20? It's nearly 20. It is. They do have it, but it's not in the first 3 years.
It's 4 or 5. They confirmed last week that it's part of their itinerary plan.
Okay, some reason I thought it had been gone, but that's great. The other question, just because you've mentioned that the 58 million, there is, I think the government has an infrastructure development part of the MB. Have we highlighted this as a potential project with them as far as infrastructure?
So we haven't commenced any work on this yet, and I suppose the point I want to make is that there are numerous ways to tackle this problem, and it is a problem because there needs to be charging infrastructure to run an electric network, but there are multiple different ways to resolve that issue, and opportunities for funding, public-private partnerships. Leaving it to the market is clearly an option. So that's the work that I indicated last year we need to do and bring back to this table. And just an interesting chatting to Richie's this morning as part of the electric bus launch, and those are the sort of parties that we need to be engaging with, as well as government, in terms of the various funds that might become clearer over the coming months to make sure we look at what those opportunities are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, then Tim.
Cool. Just 2 or 3 quick questions. Yeah, so it's not, the ORC is not going to build the depot, but its ratepayers will be paying for it under this option here, yeah?
No, so this business case indicates that in order for us to deliver an electric fleet, there will need to be a depot. No decision's been made. I mean, ultimately, if we built and owned it, then ORC ratepayers would fund it. If the bus companies build and own it, then the ratepayers and bus users would be paying for it through rates and through fees, because it would become part of the contract cost anyway. I think the opportunity that exists is to look for other funding opportunities other than just either we build it or we leave it up to the contracts, and that's the work we need to do.
Cool. So, and as you've just said, you're going to come back with some more detail on the pros and cons and the risk matrix and so forth. Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the options is simply buy the land and lease the land for somebody else to run a depot or whatever, but it's obviously a key percentage of their total capital cost is all about the depot. And I wonder whether it's more about the depot than some of the other details. My third point is page 280. 2.11, an offline solution. It says, given the rapid growth occurring in Queensland, an offline solution such as the gondola is suggested to be further invested. I assume that works, right? Invested in the 24-27 period. This will allow a lead time for investigation, blah, blah, blah. So what I read from that is that is still potentially an option, and it's got some advantages and disadvantages. And at the same time, I'm wondering how it impacts on this whole electric bus fleet scenario, or are they independent, or do they work together? If a gondola went ahead, would you actually need a depot?
Sean, you'd like to answer that question?
Yeah, so there's a few things in there to unpack. First of all, the offline option. It's recognised in the report that increasing public transport services through the buses will only go so far before it reaches capacity when you're looking at 3-minute headways, etc. And something else will be needed in the future. That online, whether it's a gondola or a tunnel, whatever it may be, needs further investigation. Previous work suggests that that's not needed for a long time, but what NZTA are putting in their NLTP, or were putting in their NLTP, is around the feasibility to understand the timing of that and the reason and what that looks like. And the reason for that is by the time you take your lead times, your design, your construction, everything, now we could be talking a good decade on. So that's what that feasibility study is about. Just going to the second point, just regarding on would that impact the depot, etc.
Yeah.
It's clear that as we do a step change, we need 62 buses, whatever the number is, and bigger buses. We need to house them somewhere, and we also need electricity to charge them. So that's where the depot comes from. So the offline solution would have no impact on the depot or what that means to decarbonisation. The offline solution is effectively an extra, and the next things once we've reached bus capacity.
Thank you.
Lorraine, did you want to add? Lorraine, would you like to add to that?
I was just going to note that the business case that NZTA is looking at is in the RLT and NLTP for 2024 to 27. It was signed off on Friday. I think it actually is the highest priority activity in the region.
Thank you.
Tim, then Kevin.
Oh, yeah, Richard, just in terms of the sort of the shifting and the moving of things at the moment, trying to fit into the long-term plan. What part of the Queenstown business case have we actually got in our long-term plan at the moment? Have we made any allowance for sort of a capital investment of land?
No, so there's been no allowances relating to the depot in the current proposed long-term plan, only the operating costs for the service, the increased services.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was only a couple of meetings ago, I think we were actually playing around with the thought of purchasing Forbury Park, which has since been purchased, which is actually great. But it seems to me that purchasing land in Queenstown is a fairly low risk sort of investment. But it seems also that it's a critical part to this strategy. Is this something that we could speed up without having to go through a long process, and perhaps include it within the next draft of our long-term plan to see what it looks like?
All right, we haven't got a lot of time to do it slowly, because if we won't decarbonise by year 4, and you think about how long it would take to construct something like this and go through the process. So it is something I've talked to Lorraine about a couple of times already in terms of how we move this on reasonably quickly, particularly these early, I guess, feasibility stages. Can we fast track purchasing? Look, I My advice, but we don't want to jump into that until we understand a little bit more about, I agree with you, it's low risk owning land in Queenstown. It's a fairly safe statement. In terms of us going that far and including into the long-term plan, I just don't think we have enough information. It wouldn't prevent us from purchasing it if during the course of, you know, the next 3-year cycle, we identify that that's the action that we do want to take. But in terms of me asking staff to include that now without some of that feasibility work around what ORC's role in that depot might be, I just don't think that would be wouldn't be my preference or my advice to council.
Yeah, I just, things always go up in cost all the time. And we look at Corrie Runaken, the decision that was delayed over a period of time and the additional costs that have gone into that building. If land is available in Queenstown and it looks okay, why would we hesitate 3 years? You know, I think it's really important that if this is a priority for us, that we actually put the antennas out now and start looking.
I would suspect that those sort of decisions have to be made well within the 3-year period, because we're talking about increases in services and electrification in year 4. So, yeah.
So, sorry, I keep turning this on and off. But I think that if we're looking at our long term, next time we're looking, we probably should put some sort of marker in this thing for the possibility of investment of land in Queenstown within this next 3-year period.
Discussion for another day.
Yep.
Sean, did you want to add something on that particular topic?
Yeah, I was going to say that the team has had a look at what land, and there's many factors to play in here. One is that you can actually get enough electricity there to actually charge the amount of charging that needs to be done. So that limits the location, and it's a big piece of land that's needed. There's not actually that much land available in the first place, and then some of the land which is available or which would be an ideal location is owned by the airport. Preliminary discussions with them is that they could potentially lease that land, but wouldn't be open to sell it. There'd be a long way to go on that. So I think if you're looking at purchasing land, it's you're probably going to be limited by site availability, and also just around where you put it has implications on, for example, operational costs. Ideally, you want something more central, so the buses aren't getting stuck when they go back to the bus to the depot in congestion, or having to reroute a long way. So there's a whole range of factors that need to be considered.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, look, I find this whole paper quite exciting, really, and it's probably the only thing I'd find wrong with this paper is that if there is actually a problem there, which I know there is, it's your staging is just too slow to get to your. So you've got a current peak capacity of 260, and you're trying to get to your 40%, which is 1,082, but you're taking on this system to 2039 to get there. If you actually need to get there to solve the problem, well, and I'm not blaming you people, but why are we taking 15 years to do it when if we look at the metrics that you've shown us now, apart from the hub, everything else is sort of in train to be done, more or less. Even if the bus route, the individualised bus route is set, and the other parts are done in the normal NZTA framework, why do we need, if $72 million was available for the bus hub and that happened in 4 years, why wouldn't I be pretty quickly at those patronage rates?
So the timing is reflects the infrastructure that's going into the NZARP. So that's that 3.3 years, 8-month project to do our bus hub at Frankton. So we've got to have enough space and manoeuvrability there to get the buses connecting. We've got to have the bus lanes going in to get them into the traffic. And even on the timeline that we've got, there are potentially issues in the town end around, it was mentioned by Bargeese, around just the traffic that there is on Shotover and Stanley. So that, like, once you get into town, the buses either have to turn around or go somewhere and lay over. And there are issues around the capacity in the town centre for moving our buses around, even parking them up at the moment. So you run the risk of, if you invest heavily in PT services, but the buses themselves just get caught in the same traffic that everybody else is in, they they're not an attractive alternative, which is one of the things we're trying to achieve here. And the 40% is actually for all alternative modes. So that's why we're working in with the travel demand management business case for Queenstown and the active transport networks that both Queenstown, QLDC and NZTA are putting in.
Yeah, right. So,
Kevin, I'll just go to Sean, just, you may just expand on what you're going to.
Yeah, I think the key point here is that, and this is a comment we got back from QLDC when we were going through this on Friday, is that Queenstown's, their reference was liquid. So beyond the sort of 3 to 6 years, it's very hard to predict with any certainty on what happens. So we've used a spatial plan for the growth, but just whether that growth goes quicker in tourism, slower. So having a real detailed program for the next 3 years of independencies, getting the best step out is really, really important. But the rest of it then becomes more of an agile program that you can adjust those routes accordingly, depending on that liquid nature of Queenstown and what happens with future growth, etc.
Kevin, I think.
Thank you.
Just to add, because it's your question is one that's come from QADC and others as well, which is around what not faster, and the answer is around the infrastructure and what we can actually put on the road. But do you remember that when you signed off you haven't signed it off, when you indicated approval of draft budgets for the LTP that we've still got to bring back, there is an amount included in there for improvements in those first 3 years, so targeted improvements where we can make them. So it is recognising that we do need to keep improving the service. We just can't go the whole hog until some of these other things are done.
yeah, I understand that, but the electrification hub is the key to it at the end of the day to make all these services work. And if that's been costed already, so it's $72 million and I want to return a 7%, well, it's not going to be hard to work out the number of buses I'm going to put through charging them in a number, is that viable? And some infrastructure investor would look at that very quickly, I would think. So I don't see that. I don't actually see that as the hiccup. I don't see that $72 million as the hiccup. I see, have we got this other stuff going at a quick enough pace to?
It's not.
Yeah.
It's just something that needs to happen, and it can happen a number of ways. The other stuff that Lorraine's talking about is the critical stuff for the network improvements.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm just struggling with the urgency. I think it is urgent, and I just think there seems to be barriers of people not making it urgent. But if you want me to help, I'm happy to help.
Did you want to respond? Yeah. To be fair, I think Queenstown Lakes, they've had a degree of frustration with, I don't want to really take the slag off NZTA. Oh, sorry. It'd be fair to say that Queenstown Lakes have expressed to us the degree of frustration they've had with NZTA to try and gather certainty around what they're committed to over and above the BP roundabout, because clearly there are other key roading improvements that dovetail into that particular project around the BP roundabout. So I think they've been confronted with a lot of frustration, and you're making the point that we really need to get certainty around those early runs on the board, and so then we can continue on to focus on what is the next target that we're looking for, in the foreseeable future or whatever. And they've been frustrated. I think it's just the environment we're in at the moment, and we'll continue to knock on the door and support Queenstown Lakes where we can, and obviously the dialogue between us and NZTA will continue. And are there any other queries? Because I think Elliot indicated he was happy to move the three recommendations. I'll just come back to Elliot in a moment. Kevin.
Mulligan's Road. It says good strong support despite having low economic benefits, does it pay its way or won't it pay its way? I suppose that's the key to it.
Eric, do you want to respond to that? And I can provide more high-level feedback that NZTA has given us. We know QLDC are in support for a Mulligan's route, so it's a NZTA BC matter. But Eric, maybe you just want to elaborate on that.
Okay, everyone. We know that we were strongly supported with the engagement, and we know that we do get percentage-wise a significant increase in patronage between those trips between Arrowtown and in Queenstown Centre. We don't at this time have like a breakdown of each individual component of the package. So that, I think, as Varg has mentioned before, that's just a little bit more work that we need to do just to make sure that the incremental economic benefit is there on that specific route.
Or the patrons are happy to pay for it.
So like Pam always said, it's only modelling. We don't know till it's happening.
No.
And sometimes we ask the community and they strongly say something and it might be a little bit different from what the business case says, but sometimes we're in the business of providing something for the community. So and then we just have to see how it goes.
Is it $5? It's $8, whatever. Yeah. Tap.
Good.
I've got heaps of questions. It's good paper.
Well, the good thing about this
keep you awake.
It'll be a major topic for us to continue to discuss and be informed through the long-term planning process. So this won't be the last time we have a focus on this topic. Elliot, you happy to move those 3 recommendations that we made in the report? Recommend to council that it endorses the Queenstown public transport business case and notes the financial management and commercial cases are only in final draft form.
Those.
Yes, second by Kate. Elliot, did you want to speak to the recommendations?
Yeah, I can touch on briefly.
Microphone, thank you.
I think, this is a great report and it's really good to see the detail coming through as we continue on and see how thorough this business case is getting. It's also really heartening to see sort of in both our partners that we're dealing with and across the political spectrum, there's sort of quite a wide recognition of the pressures that Queenstown is facing. And so the need for this work, and it is all, 100% necessary if Queenstown is to really have a future. And so I'm excited to see us carry on with this. Kia ora.
Excellent, thank you, Elliot. Kate, was there anything, sorry, thanks very much, Elliot. Kate, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I would actually, look, I think we often see public transport as we should, as a service to our ratepayers and to our communities. The thing about Queenstown is that it's a community of people, a large number of people who've lived overseas and are used to getting on buses. And they actually find it quite odd that there isn't a bus service. So I think our concerns about numbers and what our models tell us maybe skewed by the bias that it is about New Zealand rather than about the type of people who are staying in Queenstown. And given the huge issues with congestion up there that we, I'm sure, all seen, getting a better and improved service with alternative routes, because at the moment there's a huge capacity issue if one line goes out on the state highway. If you have Mulligan's Road offering an alternative, it will ease a lot of that congestion as well. We're damned when something goes wrong at the moment. It's a really good report, but I think again, those thinking about the people that may use the service, we need to be really both reminded that Queenstown is quite different than anywhere potentially different anywhere else in New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Any further speakers? Gary.
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting paper. I'll tentatively support it, but I've got real concern, real cautions around it is modelling, it's a business case. It is, there is a lot of work behind it, but it's talking relatively short timeframes and it's talking substantial sums of money invested into an area where there are all sorts of transport issues. I mean, for me, the immediate thought is the shot over the bridge is the bottleneck, and to see 50, 70 million plus the rest spent in it will be a loss-making service for a long period of time. Buses lose us money. this is going to get ring fenced into the Wakatipu. The ratepayers are going to end up funding an awful lot of money here. Will they get a service that then fixes the issue at the Shotover Bridge? Probably not. So I have some real reservations, but I'll tentatively support it to see where the business case arises at.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put those three recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Margie's. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
Cheers. Welcome back, Jack. We're now on to 7.5, transport procurement strategy. Lorraine and Jack, we're essentially in your hands, Jack.
Yeah, so kia ora. So this procurement strategy, I guess that there's a few things about it. Procurement strategies are a slightly odd second level sort of strategic document, because the first side of it's always just the compliance side, that we have a requirement with Waka Kotahi that we have to have an active procurement strategy in order to undertake procurement activities. So there's sort of a case of just needing something improved. However, we also want to actually give effect to the idea of a strategic approach to procurement and actually thinking ahead. So we do want to really put some serious thought into it as well, and make it a meaningful document, not just a tick in the box so we get the money. So we've been working on this in the past little while on a bit of a tight deadline. But that's just the way it's come out. And obviously there's some key elements in this document. And public transport is always the greatest area of interest in our transport activities. There's a few other areas we point to, but those PT services are obviously the bulk of our investment. In those services, we obviously have a pretty big change in operating environment. There's been a transition from the public transport operating model to a sustainable public transport framework, and this is it's a complicated thing. It can't really be pinned down to one particular difference. And in many ways, it's more similar to the previous model than some people might say, but there's also some really substantial differences. And obviously, under this model, it also highlights a lot of differences in operating models, and we've had these discussions in the previous section around Queenstown depots and so on. And that's obviously one of the big areas of interest for councillors and for everyone around New Zealand who's looking at these issues. And what was I going to say? One of the key pieces of feedback we got was from Deloitte, who supported the authoring of some of the underlying feedback on the SPTF, the Sustainable Transport Framework, and they have a lot of experience in Australia. A lot of Australian states, which all have their own models of this sort of thing, have gone through transitions from a more privatized to less privatized model, often taking on stronger roles around depots and fleet. And all around New Zealand, we're asking the same questions. The Sustainable Public Transport Framework even goes up to including the possibility of councils running buses directly. Now there's a whole spectrum of options in these areas, and as Richard said before, this isn't a matter of making big decisions now, but it's a matter of thinking strategically about how we're going to approach these issues in the future. What's our best idea of what the best way to approach them is? So there's various other sections. The total mobility and professional services areas are also of quite high importance in terms of our thinking going forward. But it is important. This is a lot of this paper, a lot of the strategy is these are things we still need to work on. That's just the way it's fallen out with the timing. One, because it was a bit rushed, but two, because the RPTP is a few years old now. We may be looking to do future planning work. So in a sense, we have this procurement strategy coming before the document, before other work that should come after. So if this document came after a regional public transport plan, which gave us more certainty on some of these elements you've been discussing, I think it would be able to be a more certain document. But I hope at the very least that it articulates what our options are and what our thinking so far is.
Thank you for that, Jack. It seems that we need to have all the tools in the toolbox to be able to take advantage of whatever is ahead of us in public transport from a strategic perspective and as it sort of drills down to operational matters as well. Questions for Jack? Kelly. And then Brian. Microphone, thanks.
It'll take me a while to get used to that, but just a question I had earlier. Lorraine's seen a version of already, but I was just wondering, and understandable if you can't say this about any of the contracts, but in terms of our procurement strategy, are we still looking at reduced services on public holidays essentially in those contracts, or even like no services on days like Christmas Day and stuff?
So the procurement strategy doesn't sort of take us down that path. That's what Jack talked about. We would set our service levels in the regional public transport plan, which we're going to be working on this year with you. And so those are where those policy decisions are made.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's probably beyond the scope of this plan.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, cool. I found it very interesting what you were saying, Jack. Thank you. Is there a downside to giving you a tick on this particular box? Like you're going to spend the next 6 months looking at sites in some of the smaller places, Dunedin, Queensland and others for operating. Is there a downside in terms of you're wanting to bring more of your work in-house? Is there going to be a staffing increase?
In terms of professional services, yes, and there's always a balance to be had in these areas. I'm sure Richard would speak to the detail, but you know, expertise is limited in some of the really specialised stuff we do. And we rely on a lot of expertise, and quite rightly, because there's some great people. So you know, there's give and take on these issues, isn't there?
Yeah, but like, and going back to the depot one, didn't have my words right, sorry. You're going to investigate depot ownership probably across the board. You know, so what you know, is there a downside to that? Or is it quite good at this point to be quite narrow? We're focused on patronage in Queenstown, patronage in Dunedin, without broadening it too much.
Yeah, I mean, those are these questions we need to address, because when we take up greater responsibility, that takes our attention. So we need to be cognizant of what's most important to us, and those are the discussions we need to have. So it's you know, there's ideal things we'd do if we had the resources to do everything we wanted to do, and then there's the things we do in our actual environment.
Cool, thank you.
There was another question I thought about Kevin.
Yeah. So there's three actually. On 413 we talk about asset ownership, but that's, if we say yes to this, we're not actually committing to owning the assets. We're committing to having a look to see what the best options are. So in 414 we just talked about staffing and professional need. Again, is that additional staffing over and above what we've already seen indicated in the LTP discussions we've had today?
So I'll take that one, given it's probably more of a staffing LTP. So it's not committing the council to anything in terms of staffing levels. All it's doing is indicating that there might be an opportunity for us to look at providing some skill sets in-house that we currently use consultants for. But again, we need to have a look and weigh that up, because as Jack rightly pointed out, we would never hold within staff the expertise to carry out everything, but
Yeah.
there is a balance where we might be able to hold some more skills internally within the team and not need to rely on consultants. But again, any decisions on how much you choose to fund in terms of those staff and the
Yeah.
budgets needs to come back through a council process anyway.
Yeah, but so the figures we've already had, restaffing levels, is that already included in your transport? So if I go back and look at those notes, is that possible increase already included?
Yeah, there is some increase. There is some increase
cool,
already
cool,
in there.
that's good.
Yeah,
And-
some of those key areas.
Yeah, thank you. And total mobility, is what you're saying there is that we may actually take that over as a contracted service, just like the buses?
That's, I wouldn't quite say it that way, though. That's a wider question in the, okay, so two parts. One is total mobility as it currently exists.
Yep.
And this is run as a concession scheme, and the current approach is that we're pretty open to any operator coming in, meeting standards and being accepted. Now, under the current total mobility scheme, there's no suggestion of changing the underlying concession model, but there's a suggestion of going through a bit more of a formal process of selecting who's an appropriate supplier who meets our requirements. And I put that in just because that's something that they did in Christchurch. We've got quite a small number of total mobility suppliers, and they went through a process to say, hey, we want to formalise this through something more like what you do with the tender, but still total mobility is still its own thing.
Yeah.
And then the second area is there is a review of total mobility, and they will ask wider questions on the operating model, not unlike the SPTF actually, and that might come up with very aggressive solutions like running it like buses or something else.
International.
Yeah, that's good.
But that's just me speculating. I don't know.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, would someone like to move recommendation 1 that we note report, and then 2, 3, and 4 as set out in the audit paper. Moved Elliot, you want a second?
With no amendments.
That was second.
Second.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thanks, none. Sorry,
Just in terms of,
that's good.
just in terms of the recommendations being moved, sorry, in terms of recommendations being moved, if the committee don't have any specific changes, then we could actually remove 2. And that may mean that there's some edits made that I would have delegation to sign off, but the plan as it's presented in this will go forward without any changes.
So 2 is redundant. Okay, so we're 1, 3, and 4. Moved by Elliot, second by Helen. Any Elliot, do you want to speak to that? Give it.
No, I'm comfortable.
Oh, you're
yeah. No, I was just going to second it if you would.
No,
Jump in. So it's cool.
Any other comments, speakers? If not, I'll put those 3 recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Jack. Really appreciate your work. We look forward to the next stage. Now, we'll end with a karakia. There is no further business. Ikeo to ranga a Marie, te ranga e nei iwi Otuao. And that's basically let peace reign on all peoples in the world.
Finally.
Thank you all.